Pat Brown, we were talking not too long ago about airplane ownership and is it reasonable for somebody to buy an airplane? And we covered a lot of ground because we're brilliant guys and we know everything there is to know. Mostly you, but every once in a while I know something. But we didn't cover everything. And I think it's important if we're going to talk about airplane ownership, which has been very beneficial in both of our lives, we got to talk about a couple things that we didn't cover in part one. And that would be insurance, where are you going to put this darn thing, and maintenance. So let's start with insurance. You own an airplane and your partner in another airplane. Do you have insurance, young man?
We do. I want to protect that asset or those assets, as the case may be. So, yes, sir, we do have insurance. I wouldn't be without it.
I think one of the things that is misunderstood about aircraft insurance is there's a couple different types we want to know about. Liability is a really good idea to have, just like you have liability on your car. But hull insurance is what we call the aviation equivalent of collision.
Right.
So you can opt to do those. For instance, when I owned the AirCam, an experimental twin engine tail dragger, awesome airplane. I mean, just all the fun in the world. I carried just liability on it because liability on that airplane back then was right around $600 a year. But because it was an experimental twin tail dragger, if I added hull, it would be over 6,000 a year. So we can make some decisions on how we keep the insurance costs down and still cover ourselves. Although, if I had something more traditional like a Cessna 182, like you've got, I might carry hull insurance because airframe repairs can be expensive.
Yeah, and I don't want that thing to turn into a very expensive boat anchor. So, uh,
Well put.
I want to get it fixed. So, yeah, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. I mean, the cost of insurance. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and I probably ought to put a disclaimer in here that neither one of us are insurance brokers, and neither one of us are insurance salespeople or in that
We're not
profession.
getting a
But
commission.
we're not
Now,
getting a
now
commission.
I'm
Sorry,
upset.
no commish, Jamie, no commish. But we've both been around the block a time or two, and the cost of the airplane is a big factor. I mean, this seems like a no brainer, but some people just don't really get that. Um, if I bought a brand new Cirrus today at $1 million or nearly that, my premium is going to be whatever that number is, but it's probably going to choke a horse depending on my experience. If I buy a 2001 Cirrus, which is you could probably buy one, even with the inflated prices today, probably buy one for somewhere in the neighborhood of 250K or thereabouts. My insurance is going to be lower for essentially the same airplane. So, and Cirrus owners, don't flame me here. I realize there's been, the G6 has got lots of improvements, but it's essentially the same airplane.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. I mean, if I bought a 1958 Cessna 172 as opposed to a 2020 172, the insurance rates are going to be dramatically different because the hull value of that airplane is very different. Although, as you say, it's essentially the same airplane. I know there's horsepower differences and the panel is different, but it's still a four-seat airplane that'll do basic general aviation flying, but the
yeah,
cost of insuring one is dramatically different than the cost of insuring the other. And
yeah.
that's worth thinking about when you're shopping to buy the airplane.
Yeah, the other elements could be um, how old are you? As much as I hate to admit it, there's going to come a point where the insurance companies are looking at me and saying, even though I fly 600 hours a year on a regular basis, there's going to come a point. Um, they're going to look at overall experience. If you're a 100-hour non-instrument rated pilot looking to buy a Mooney or some sort of a high performance Cessna 210 or something like that, a Centurion, your insurance rates are going to reflect the fact that you're a 100-hour non-instrument rated pilot. Oftentimes, just nothing more than getting your instrument rating will bring those insurance costs down. Oftentimes, let's say that you buy an airplane and the premium is up here this year, but you fly it for a year without incident, and you get your instrument rating in that year. Don't be surprised if that premium comes down at least some in year two. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen, but more than likely your premium is going to come down in year two. I actually had my partner in the Comanche and I, for some reason we don't honestly don't understand, is last year where everybody else was getting insurance premium increases, we had a decrease of $500. That was a significant decrease in our
Well,
insurance.
you
Now,
are
now
Pat Brown. Let's
well,
be
I
honest.
don't,
You are Pat Brown.
but my partner passed 1,000 hours of retract time in that airplane.
There you
That
go.
could have had something to do with it, because he and I are within a few years of the same age. But that could have had something to do with it. Now this year it went up $300, but it's still a net decrease of $200 over a 2 year period of time. So those things, while rare, you can see an insurance decrease. And now, obviously, we're recording this at a particular point in time in 2023 when insurance rates have hardened over the last several years, and fairly substantial increases. And when I say substantial, it really kind of depends on so many factors. But a 5 or 6 or 7% increase, I'd consider myself fortunate if that's all it was over the next few years. But I've heard folks that are getting 10, 15, 20, 30% increases in prices. And I've got a good friend who was just told by his insurance agent that he could not even find insurance for my friend in a Bonanza. My friend's 80 years old, very
That's
healthy,
one of the
flies a
thing that
lot.
I find. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just like that.
That's
Uh,
all right.
that is one of those things that people miss. I've met a number of people who were looking to buy a sport aircraft because they just don't want to do the medical thing anymore. They're going to use the sport pilot privileges of their private or commercial or ATP. And they find because they've hit that magic number of 70 years old, the insurance company wants them to have a third class medical, even though the FAA says that's not necessary. So, insurance, while not totally, well, I don't even know what the term is. Well, insurance can be problematic, but most of those problems can be solved. And as you said, talking about the price increases, decreases on the Comanche you're a partner in, being a partner, sometimes a co-owner can be an advantage because you're splitting that insurance cost over 2 or 3 or 5 ways. So it's
Exactly.
actually possible to get that insurance on a per person basis down fairly low,
Yeah.
even if it appears that the overall ticket is fairly high.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then back to one of your previous points is, you can choose if you want to carry liability only and not carry hull coverage. If you're willing to accept the fact that, if there's some damage to the airplane, you may not be able to afford to fix it. You might look into a higher deductible, kind of like automobile. There's not a lot of parallel between automobile insurance and airplane insurance, but oftentimes the aircraft insurance is just offered to you normally with no deductible, maybe $1,000. But I'm seeing more and more over the years. I've seen more and more where there's simply no deductible. Maybe the underwriter's negotiable to $5,000 deductible or $10,000 deductible or something like that, that helps to bring that whole coverage down to to a manageable level where you can still afford to keep both.
Yeah, and it's probably worth mentioning one of the easiest ways to keep your insurance costs down is to reduce the complexity of the airplane. An airplane with a fixed pitch propeller and fixed landing gear and relatively low horsepower is going to be much less to insure than that Bonanza with retractable gear, constant speed prop. It's just the nature of it. The less likely it is you're going to have a problem with the airplane, like landing gear up, whether that's a mistake or a maintenance issue, the more likely it is your insurance bill is going to be affordable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually from a practical standpoint the reason that I bought the 182. I had a Cirrus in a four-way partnership great airplane. But a year or so ago, I started thinking about this issue as the clock ticks. Um, it would probably be easier for me to establish a relationship with an insurance company and an underwriter, a carrier, over the course of a number of years in a simpler airplane like a 182. And hopefully that would be more likely to keep me insured as the clock keeps ticking, whereas the Cirrus might become problematic in another few years.
One other area that can get costly if you don't manage it is maintenance, Pat. I
Oh, yeah.
mean, there are annual inspections that have to happen. There's going to be an issue. It's a machine. Anything mechanical is going to have a problem at some point. One of the ways you can really help cut that cost is learning to do owner assisted maintenance, where you work with a mechanic who, when the annual comes, you can remove all the inspection covers and pull out the interior. It's not all that hard, but now you're doing it instead of paying somebody $95 an hour to do it. Or, as we know very well, Pat, Part 43, the maintenance section of the FARs, there's a whole list of things that an owner can do to their own airplane, like tires and spark plugs, that save you a boatload of money. That's all true, isn't it?
Yeah, Part 43, to be specific, it's Appendix A, Paragraph C, gives
That's pretty
you.
specific. Thank you,
That's
Pat.
pretty specific, yeah. There's actually 31 things, to be more specific, 31 things that you can do, including exactly what you talked about: replacing tires, tubes, brakes. You can replace lines in the engine as long as they're pre-cut and pre-formed. You can replace light bulbs. You can actually replace plastic glass, the glass in the cockpit, the windscreen, and all that other kind of stuff. Now, if you do the windscreen, you have to have an A&P sign it off. But there are other things that you can do like that. Minor fabric repairs. Like I said, there's 31 things in there. There's You can change the oil, but we've joked about this before. There's nothing on that list that says specifically that you can change the oil. But if you look along all the 31 things, three of the things that are on that list effectively end up with an oil change.
Mhm.
So even oil changes you can do, and you can save. The last oil change that I actually paid for on the Comanche was $430. Now that was 2 hours labor, which is about right for that airplane, and 11 quarts of oil and shop supplies and things like that. But if my partner and I had had the time to do it ourselves, obviously that 2 hours of labor might have been two and a half with us doing it, but we would have certainly saved. And in this case, it's $125 an hour shop rate. We'd have saved $250 if we'd have done it ourselves. So, and next time we probably will. It just fell at a time when we didn't have the time to do it.
Yeah, I just worked with a guy who just bought a Jabiru. We did an oil change on his airplane because he had flown it home from Oregon. And, hey, it's got some time on it. Let's do one. It was just about an hour, and it really
Yeah.
wasn't that tough at all. The other thing is, when you do owner assisted maintenance, you learn a lot about your airplane. And even as a pilot, having the ability while you're flying along and you hear something or you see something or you notice a reading on a gauge, having more understanding of the airplane can bring a lot of comfort in flight when you realize, oh yeah, that's normal. That's going to happen.
That's very true.
The,
Very,
the
very.
other thing I need to talk about, Pat, and it's all about me. I think we can agree that it's all about me. Where are you going to keep this airplane when you buy it? Now, are you going to put it out on the ramp to save money? A lot of flight schools leave airplanes on the ramp full time. Or are you going to put it in a hangar? Or maybe that's a T hangar. Maybe it's a community hangar where you store it with a variety of other airplanes. What do you do with your airplanes, Pat?
The 182 is in a community hangar. Um, and it's got full in and out privileges. So if I need the airplane, I just call the airport up, and they typically ask for an hour's notice. Usually, it's there quicker, and I'll just tell them, I'm going to be flying at X o'clock. Would you have the airplane there by whenever? And it's there. The Comanche, we're in a T hangar. Open the doors and pull it out. We got a tug, push it back in. At our airport, we have something called T covers, which by some airports will call hail sheds, which is nothing more than just basically a roof and open walls, and that's all there is to it. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Primarily, you want to protect your airplane from hail damage, because I don't know that there's any part of the country that doesn't at least occasionally experience thunderstorms or something that causes hail. Um, in certain parts of the country, like where we are, boy, if you put that airplane outside, especially if you don't have any kind of cover for it, or sunscreens or something like that, you'll just cook the interior, and all
Yeah.
that heat is not good on the avionics. I mean, when it's 160 degrees inside the airplane because it's been sitting out, and in today's supposed to be 103 degrees here in Houston. That's just the temperature. The feels like it's going to be worse. Um, I mean, that's 140, 150, 160 degrees in the cockpit. If it sits out in direct sunlight, that's just not good on anything. It's not good on the interior. It's not good on the glare shield. It's not good on the electronics. It's not good on anything. So, at the very least, some sort of a canvas cover, um, some sort of reflective windscreen and side windows and back windows covering. I've got that for the 182. I have the Canon window coverings. For the Comanche, we have the same thing. So if it's outside, for example, sitting outside at Sun and Fun or sitting outside at Oshkosh, at the very least we're keeping that direct sunlight off the glare shield and off the interior.
Yeah, I gotta admit, there are places where you just can't get a T hanger or a community hanger. And by the way, those shell hangers, we call them shade hangers here because
Yeah,
you want shade. You don't want it in the sun. But if you've got no choice but to leave it on the ramp, the upside of that is it's very affordable. Ramp space really doesn't cost much at all,
right.
but you do want to get a cover for that airplane. And they have a soft side so it doesn't scratch the plexiglass.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of extra work before and after every flight, but man, it pays off in not crazing the plexiglass from all the sunlight, not fading the interior, not causing all the plastic inside to break up because it will over time. UV isn't just bad for old guys who get spotty. It's really bad for airplane interiors as well.
Yeah, if you want to, and if you really want to take it to the extreme in terms of covers, there are companies that will make covers for your wings, as well as just the glass and it's kind of the top of the fuselage, and
Oh yeah,
even
Google airplane covers. You'd be surprised. There are
oh
companies
yeah,
that specialize. That's what they do
yeah,
because they're aware there are a fixed number of hangars and there are many more airplanes than that.
yeah. So that would, especially if it looks like you're going to be on a waiting list for any particular length of time, it's probably worth investing in some wing covers and some empennage covers, and and as you said, Jamie, that takes a little bit of time, and if you're going to carry that stuff in the airplane when you travel, that's certainly a weight consideration. But if it's just a local flight, just throw them in the trunk of your car.
Yeah, and the one caveat I would offer on that is if you buy an airplane that's fabric covered, and I
No.
happen to like the old airplanes that are steel tube and fabric, find a way to get that indoors. They don't do well out in the sun full time. It just that's that fabric, that Dacron fabric, theoretically will last forever. The tubing underneath will need repair before the fabric does if it's protected from UV. But if it's out on the ramp, it might only last 5 or 10 years tops, and you're going to be
Yeah.
recovering it, and that's really expensive. I'd rather do an engine overhaul than recover an airplane.
Yeah, I've never done a recovering. I've only heard stories, but every one of them are exactly like you said. You'd rather change an engine than recover an airplane, because then you got to
Oh, I
dope it, and then you got to paint it, and all that stuff.
Well, and the big thing is, especially if it's one that's been covered for 30, 40 years, when you cut the fabric off, there's going to be issues underneath. There's more to it than just the fabric.
Guaranteed,
Pat,
guaranteed.
I can't thank you enough. Just a wealth of information. In 2 videos, we've covered buying an airplane, a little bit on the financing, mission that you're going to do, what's the right fit for you, maintenance, storage, everything. Thanks so much. This is so much. And, to the audience, I got to say, when you tune into a Mad Props Aero video and you get the benefit from the genius of a guy like Pat Brown for no cost at all, you really should click the like button. And I think, I don't want to shame you, but I think subscribing would be appropriate. Pat, don't you think subscribing would be appropriate?
I'm going to defer to your best judgment, Jamie.
Well, with that in mind, go ahead and leave us a comment down below. Tell us what you thought. Are you thinking of buying an airplane? Did these videos help you make the decision to buy an airplane? And if you've got questions, go ahead and put them in the comments, because Pat and I actually will answer you.
Yes,
So
we do.
thanks so much. Appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time right here on your personal device.